Raider Nation, I'm Mitchell Renz, host of the Raiders Report. And coming up on today's show, we got the top 10 wide receivers I want the Raiders to select in the 2024 NFL Draft. Now, I got to always say, because this is not a ranking of the top 10 receivers in the NFL Draft, this is simply based on which players I want Tom Telesco, Antonio Pierce to target the most. The way that these rankings are based on is overall skill set, fit with the Raiders, and projected draft costs. There are certain players that I like that the Raiders can get in round 5 and 6 that are going to be higher based on just because I like the idea of the Raiders getting a receiver later in the rounds instead of you using a pick earlier on in the draft. However, this is a very split bag because I do think there's a lot of people out there that are very confident in this Raiders wide receiver room, which I can make a lot of arguments for. You got arguably the best guy in Davante Adams. Jakobi Meyers is one of the best wide receiver twos in football. Then you got Trey Tucker in the slot is how I would sell this as the good. The bad would be Davante Adams is over 31. Jakobi Meyers is a good, reliable wide receiver two. Trey Tucker is still very unknown. Christian Wilkerson, DJ Turner, let's face it, not a lot of confidence in those guys. And if, God forbid, if one of your starters, one of the guys' pictures go down, then you definitely need to add another receiver to this room. If you're looking, though, for Raiders draft videos, because it's insane to say that the NFL draft, it's like 2 weeks away, right? Like, it is so close, I can almost taste it. And I'm going to be making videos for top 10 targets at each position. If you want to see corner, linebacker, offensive tackle, running back, all of those videos are already made, and they're going to be in the description of this video right here. So go check them all out, see which players I want the Raiders to target. Let's get this thing going. We're going to go from 10, work our way down to 1. Coming in here at number 10, receiver from Oregon, it's Troy Franklin. And Franklin is a very fun and intriguing prospect for me to watch on tape because he just is a high yards after the catch type of dude, right? Like tall, linear, good speed, got a quick release. Some people compare him to Deshaun Jackson, which I can kind of see some of the comparisons there. I will say the below average strength, I do think that he could struggle against some physicality, and based on the type of offense that I think that the Raiders want to run, they're probably going to be looking for somebody that is a little bit more of a physical receiver. But that high yards after the catch average, the ability to open things up underneath for his teammates is something that is very important. 6'3", 190-pound Oregon Duck who had 81 grabs, close to 1,400 yards, 14 touchdowns. I mean, this guy was a highlight reel. However, I think you'd probably have to take him at pick 44. I don't want the Raiders to take a receiver in round 1. I don't want the Raiders to take a receiver in round 2. So to me, you probably have to hope that he's available in round 3, and I just don't think that that's going to happen. Let's go to number 9 here on my list. It is Roman Wilson from the Michigan Wolverines. I had a source that was at the Senior Bowl tell me the Raiders were very impressed by Wilson, but that really shouldn't surprise anybody considering the fact that he was probably the best receiver that was at the Senior Bowl. He's got explosive speed. That acceleration really helps him get off the jump, and he does have that ability to stretch the field. He's not a great blocker, but he is dangerous in open space. So if you wanted to be able to say, okay, I'm looking for another slot receiver that I can add competition to with a guy like Trey Tucker, Roman Wilson, I actually think probably wins that battle. I think Wilson is a better receiver than Tucker, though Tucker is probably the better special teams player. So you add Roman Wilson in at the slot, and you let Trey Tucker kind of take on the DeAndre Carter role of, hey, I want you to concentrate a little bit more on special teams, which is something that the Raiders, I do think, still have to figure out since all these new kickoff return rules and Carter's not back yet. Something to think about. Yeah, the numbers aren't great for Wilson, but that's more due to the fact that the style of offense that Michigan ran. And the only player that made Quinyon Mitchell at the Senior Bowl look human was Wilson. In the one-on-ones, Wilson won some of those reps. Everybody else that Quinyon Mitchell went up against at the Senior Bowl, Quinyon worked him. Wilson, though, held his own. And that is something that I do think is very important, where if I'm going to target him, it's going to be in round 3. But because of Wilson's success against Mitchell at the Senior Bowl, I could actually see him maybe going even a little bit higher. So this is the pinned comment because at the end of the day, like, this is what this episode is about here. Which round should the Raiders draft a wide receiver in? I don't think they should draft a receiver in round 1. I don't think they should draft a receiver in round 2. And coming up after this YouTube ad break, I'm going to tell you where I like to target receivers in my mock drafts. That sweet special spot for me is 4 and 5. If you're looking for a legit guy that you can have say, okay, come on this roster, giggity, and be a legit impact player in year one, you're probably going to be looking in round 4. Round 3 is even a little bit rich for my blood because this team has other needs. There's some other good talent a little bit later on in the draft. And in fact, one of the players that I like in the later rounds is coming up next here on the show. His name is Anthony Gould, the receiver from Oregon State. And this guy is electric. He's fun to watch. He can make people miss. And if he's in open space, you don't want to be one-on-one with him. He's got legit 4.39, 40 speed to stretch the field. He's shiftiness to uncover against tight man coverages from the slot. So, again, this is a dude that I think you probably try to put in the slot to compete with Trey Tucker here a little bit. But the biggest reason why I added him to this show is his ability in special teams. If you draft Anthony Gould, and if you're able to get him in round 7, which is where I would target him, you get him in round 7, you put him as your kick returner, you put him as your punt returner, you let him handle all those duties, and you say, hey, Trey Tucker, all I need you to do is just be a backup in case we're going to have Amir Abdullah. He's going to be able to fill in the special teams role as well. And Trey, I need you to worry about being a receiver because I do think Trey Tucker is a more talented receiver than Anthony Gould. Anthony Gould, though, might be the better special teams player, and it is something that teams need to consider. And if, God forbid, Trey Tucker were to go down, I do think it's a very easy type of replacement for Tucker that you would be able to have on your 4th-string wide receiver list. This also helps you have the ability to potentially move on from DJ Turner on your 53-man roster and add another player that you'd be able to keep to another probably important position. Let's go to number 7 here, and it's a player that I'm starting to like more and more that I watch him. And I'm curious if I do this show in another week, I might even bump this guy up. Tahj Washington from USC. His toughness fits what the Raiders are looking for. This guy makes contested catches. I'll admit he has to make some of those contested catches because I don't know if he's all that great of a route runner, but another dude that if you're looking for an explosive athlete that you'd be able to put in the punt and kick returner game, plus not many receivers at his size, I'd be confident that could be a gunner, but because when he plays, he's not afraid to hit people, and he likes to run block. Dude, like on tape, somebody that's this size should not be as good of a blocker as what he is, because I think pound for pound, he might be one of the best run blockers that I've seen at the receiver position. For 5'10", 175 pounds, this guy wants to be a competitor, and I think he'd be a hell of a competition next to somebody like Trey Tucker, because this is somebody who wants to put their nose in the action. And last season had 59 grabs, over 1,000 yards, put up better numbers than Brenden Rice. Though I do think Rice's talent and skill set probably is a better fit in the NFL. But there's going to be a team that gets Tahj Washington in round 6 is where I would consider potentially drafting him for the Raiders at pick 208 instead of waiting for like 223 or 229 because of that ability in special teams. If you don't want to replace DeAndre Carter, I do think Tahj Washington is a name that just continues to grow and grow on me the more tape I watch on him. Before I get into my top 6 receivers that I want the Raiders to target, I do got to give a shout out to today's sponsor, Prize Picks. $100 deposit match if you go to prizepicks.com/CLNS. And if anybody out there likes daily fantasy sports made easy, well, then this is the perfect sponsor for you. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with NBA, NHL, and MLB entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Prize Picks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types, or make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. If you want to see the picks that I'm rolling with for golf, which I think this is just another way to show you that you can do so much on Prize Picks. And I know a bunch of the guys here are excited about the Masters, and they're excited about golf, and I'm not a big golfer, though. I have been trying to improve my game. I've been playing, I try to go to the golf simulator at my apartment complex at least once a month, just hit a few golf balls. That way in the summertime, I can maybe at least go on the course one time. But bottom line is this, I don't give a rat's ass about golf. Guess what I will care about? This, and the money going in my pocket. So if you're like me, go to prizepicks.com/CLNS. And at the end of the day, I like competition. I like being able to watch something. I like being able to keep my mind occupied. And if you're like me, well, then listen up one more time here. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Shout out to Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app, for hooking up the nation. Win big money. Withdraw your winnings. Shout out to Prize Picks. Let's go to number 6 here. It's Jalen Polk from Washington. And I know there's some mixed decisions on who's the top receiver after Odunze on Washington. To me, the guy that I think is going to be better in the NFL is Polk. And he's got that NFL body type that is equipped with his jump ball talent, so I know that he's going to be good in the red zone. And I just don't think he has a high ceiling, but I don't think that he has that low of a floor. And to me, he's a safe player that if you're like, I got to add depth, and right now for the Raiders, I want to be able to add depth. That's exactly what Polk's going to be. He's got to be able to prove to me that he's got better burst and suddenness to like create some of those separations. And I think he got open a lot more at Washington because Penix was one of the best quarterbacks in college. They have one of the best offensive lines, arguably the best offensive line in all of college football. And was he the third? Was he the second option? I know he wasn't the first behind Rome. To me, though, when he's like coming out of college, if he really projects the right way, he's a more talented Jacoby Myers. But he's got to be in the right like situation. He's a bigger receiver. He's not super fast. He's a possession guy, 6'2", 204 pounds. Had a nice amount of catches last season for the Huskies with 9 touchdowns. To me, this is a really good wide receiver 3 to be able to compete with Trey Tucker. And then in this situation, I might even argue then that Tucker's probably would end up being the guy that would handle a lot more of your special teams roles. Let's go to number 5. And this might be a name that a lot of y'all might not know about, but if you want to watch some fun tape, Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky might have some of the best. Malachi Corley, from Western Kentucky, might have some of the best tape out there. Big physical player that was used in college, kind of like a Deebo Samuel. And Deebo, to me, is one of these players that I do think the NFL might try to find and might try to go out and get that replica because he's big, he's physical, and he is an average route runner. Like, he's got the concentration problems. He's got some of the drop problems as well that when it comes up on tape, you're like, yeah, that wasn't pretty. And a lot of times people really point out the drop issues for the simple fact of it happens right in that moment. But the other things that he did, and when a team puts as much on his shoulders that they did, like this was a dude that's rushing footballs. This guy's catching, like he was this entire offense. Could be a fun gadget player in the NFL, but needs to be in the right system. I'll admit, I don't love the idea of trusting Luke Getsy with a player like this, but it would not surprise me if somebody said, hey, this Malachi Corley guy was drafted in round 4, and he turns out to be a lesser version of a Deebo, but somebody that you can use in a lot of different areas to your game to help just improve, especially he would be a fun player, especially when you get in those hard-to-reach spots in the red zone. Just move him all over the football field, a lot of pre-snap motion, which is something that AP does want to do. Let's go to number 4 here. It's Jermaine Burton from Alabama, and we know that this team has been looking for a field stretcher for quite some time, and they want to be able to add a little bit more vertical speed because you can love Devontae, you can love Jacoby, but let's face it, neither of those guys are field stretchers. And what I also love about him is he might be the best deep ball tracker in this class, where a lot of guys can run fast, but can you catch the football? And at 4.45 40 speed, he reminds me of some of the best center fielders in the MLB where that ball goes up in the air like, man, that's a double, that's in the gap, it might be a triple. And then all of a sudden you're like, how the hell did he get to that ball? Burton's ability to track the football is very impressive to me. His hands are gigantic. He's strong. He's automatic. If that ball is coming to him, he's going to catch this football. I do think he plays a lot bigger than what he is, and that's probably because of that physical toughness that he has. Though the yards after the catch for how good of an athlete that he is, his ability to create in space, it's not really there. To me, when I look at a player that I'm saying like, okay, you want to throw some deep balls to, create some open space, and really create that vertical passing game, if the Raiders draft somebody like a Jaden Daniels, who I think has one of the best deep balls in the game, if you're able to add a Burton, that could be a very dangerous combo later on. I don't know if it would happen because, again, if you take quarterback and then you go wide receiver your first 2 picks, there's still a lot of other needs out there to be had. But Burton's a fun player, and I think it'd be a pretty damn good fit. Now, there's going to be some people that say, well, wait a minute, Mitch. What about a Marvin Harrison Jr.? Remember, I'm doing this based on players that I think the Raiders have an actual chance to get. The only way that you're going to get a Marvin Harrison Jr., a Malik Nabers, a Odunze, which those are the top 3 receivers in this year's class. I'm not going to put Brian Thomas Jr. in this list because, again, I don't want the Raiders to draft a receiver in round 1. But to me, there is a clear-cut top 3 receivers, and it's those names that I just mentioned. However, I'm always curious of what you guys have to say. I didn't have Justin Jefferson as my number 1 receiver in the year he came out. But guess what? Probably the best receiver that came out in that class, right? Who do you think is the best wide receiver in this draft? And these names are not featured on this video because, again, the only way you're getting them is if you're trading up. And I'm not trading up for anything in the top 10 unless it's a quarterback. So if you think it's Marvin Harrison Jr., Odunze, Malik Nabers, or if it's somebody else, please let me know down below. My name on this, who I think is the best receiver in this class, is Marvin Harrison Jr., though the tape that I watch on Odunze, if he lands up in the right squad, because a lot of times it's based on fit, I will say to me, the receiver that ends up being the best receiver in this year's class, hold your ears, if the Chargers pick somebody at 5, probably will be the number 1 receiver next to Los Angeles. Some of those other spots, I don't know how good of a fit that some of those guys will be. Let's go to where this really gets interesting, and if I'm the Raiders, I really want them to take a receiver out of these next 3 names here. This guy's coming up, Javon Baker, and another player that the more and more tape you watch on him, the more that you're going to like because he's just a really good player, and it's just a guy that gets open, and it's something that I always write down in my notes of, you know what, this dude might not be the best player in terms of athletic ability, but if you get open, like that needs to be said, right? Like Hunter Renfrow just got open, wasn't an athletic freak. Cooper Kupp, not an athletic freak, just gets open, but he does separate with good routes. He uses his speed, and his change of speed is very important in routes where there's some guys, they can only run 1 speed when they run a route. Like, that's it. That's all you get. Not Baker. He can really change it up where he's like, imagine a pitcher that's out there that's throwing a 95 fastball, 92 cutter, an 80-mile-an-hour changeup, a 75-mile-an-hour curveball. They're switching up the speed so much, and it's really hard for that batter to kind of time up. When you have a receiver that can do all this stuff too, it makes it really difficult on the defensive back as well. I will say he wins downfield. He can really spring. He can get vertical. His ball tracking skills are impressive. He does struggle with concentration drops, and he's not a great blocker. Those are like my biggest knocks on him. But at 6'1", 210 pounds, it would be a fun player that if you could target him in round 4, some people think that he might go earlier than that. I've also seen that he might go in round 5. To me, Baker could go somewhere between round 3, round 5. I would consider drafting him at pick 112, no higher. Let's go to number 2 here, Malik Washington from Virginia. I am flat out telling you that I heard from a source about 6 weeks ago to 2 months ago that the Raiders were interested in Washington's ability because his production that he put up at Virginia was pretty damn special, posting 100-plus yards in 10 of his final 11 games with a team that, let's face it, did not have a lot of talent around him. He's got soft hands. He's built like a running back, and he's just fun to watch. This is a slot receiver. So, again, a player that's going to go out there and compete with Trey Tucker. I don't really think that he's somebody that you're going to put in special teams necessarily if you're the Raiders. This would be, hey, let's put Malik in at the slot. He did run a basic route tree at Virginia. Could you just because he was at Virginia? But him next to Jacoby Myers, next to Devontae Adams, then you put Trey Tucker in wide receiver 4 situations to stretch the field and put Trey Tucker in at special teams. Makes this offense a little bit better. But it's another dude, not a big guy, 5'8", 195 pounds, but just got open and got open often. Is it the level of competition? Perhaps. But if you could tell me, hey, we could get him in round 5, round 6, that value that allows us then to get other bigger needs in this year's draft, Malik Washington in round 5, I'm on board for it. So how about this? If you could draft only one receiver, and that name is obviously the name that's about to come up here for me, who should it be? People that watch this show, you might already know my answer because I've kind of said it on past streams and whatnot. But if you were the Las Vegas Raiders and you could only draft one wide receiver, who should it be? The person that I think that it could be and the person that I think that it will be is Brenden Rice from USC. Out of the top 30 visits that the Raiders have had, there is only one, at the time that I'm making this video, one receiver that the Raiders met with on a top 30 visit. His name is Brenden Rice. If you don't know, he is the son of the best receiver to ever play the game in Jerry Rice. And The reason why that I think that he's number one on this list is because the physicality, his ability to dominate in the red zone, the fit with the mentality that this Raiders team is going to bring, on top of the fact that I know the Raiders coaching staff, they've been trying to add previous players to then help like with the overall coaching ability. I mean, this guy's been getting coached up by Jerry Rice his entire life, and there are some teams that we've talked to from the Combine and from the Super Bowl that there's some teams out there that look at certain players, like if you come from that family background of they probably know what it takes to make it in the NFL, it's a little bit of a safer pick. I will say he does have trouble separating from routes underneath just because he's not an incredible athlete. But Brenden Rice, to me, at 6'3", 210 pounds, if you can get him in round 4, I don't really love the idea of taking him in round 3 at pick 77. But if you told me we could get him at round 4, pick 112, I don't think there's a better value, better player, better fit for the Raiders than Rice in round 4 from USC. So one more time here, let's go through our top 10 receivers that I want the Raiders to target in this year's draft. And if you're looking for more of the top guys, Troy Franklin, Roman Wilson, a little bit some of the later round guys, and Anthony Gould and Tahj Washington. Jalen Polk is a very intriguing prospect to me, coming in at number 6. Malachi Corley, if you want a lesser version of a Deebo Samuel. Jermaine Burton. And then there's a tier break for me because I just like the idea of getting receivers in 4, 5, round 6, and that's Javon Baker, round 4, Malik Washington, round 5 and 6, Brenden Rice in round 4 to me is the overall best value. And if I miss the player, and this is one thing, these are probably the comments that I like the most from these draft videos that I do. It's based on what players that I miss, like what guys should I go do more homework on, because I'm going to be real with you. I haven't watched tape on every single receiver out there. I haven't watched tape on every single player out there. I write down certain names. I want to watch a little bit on them, and then I pick the guys that I like. That's what happens. So if you're like, dude, you're missing this guy, tell me. I'll go watch more tape on him. But I've watched probably the top 20 receivers, all the top 20 receivers out there I've probably watched. So give me a name if there's somebody that I missed. Please, shout out to all y'all for tuning in. And remember, Jeremy Chuggs and I, we are going to be live for the NFL draft. All 7 rounds, every single pick. Make sure you don't miss it, because if they do draft a receiver, we're going to be partying here on the Raiders Report.